When the alien emperor cast his obese daughter aside in disgrace, he thought his decision was final. But what he didn't expect was a humble human mechanic, armed with nothing but his tools and heart, to step in and defy his decree. With nothing but scraps and ingenuity, he crafts a throne that could change everything, not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If stories like this make you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than today's. The Imperial Hall was a vast expanse of marble and glass, its opulence designed to dazzle, to command respect. Today, however, it felt like a cage. The alien emperor stood on his elevated throne, casting a shadow that stretched across the room. Beside him, Princess Solara, his only daughter, knelt before the assembly. Her once proud posture now drooped under the weight of the emperor's disdain. "Look at her," the emperor sneered, his voice ringing through the hall like the strike of a hammer. "A disgrace to my bloodline, a reminder of weakness. You are unworthy, Solara, unworthy of this crown, unworthy of your people." Solara's green skin, once admired for its radiant sheen, now seemed dull under the harsh light. Her wide, violet eyes, usually filled with wonder, were clouded with sorrow. The murmurs of the court washed over her, cruel and sharp, like 1,000 needles pricking her skin. The whispers grew louder, more venomous. She could hear them all: her weight, her appearance, her failure to meet the emperor's expectations. The very people who once adored her now laughed behind their masks. Her father's words cut deeper than the harshest blade. "You are nothing more than a symbol of failure, Solara. Your existence only embarrasses this family. Leave my sight." The decree echoed across the hall, and Solara felt the cold weight of exile wrap around her like a suffocating cloak. No more would she walk the luxurious halls of the palace. No more would she hear the cheers of her people. She had been cast aside, abandoned like an obsolete relic. Her once proud title meant nothing now. To the emperor, she was a broken thing. The guards approached, their steps heavy, their eyes cold. They reached down, gripping her arms, pulling her roughly from the floor. She did not resist. There was no fight left in her. She had been humiliated in front of the entire court, and the pain of that humiliation was unbearable. But as they dragged her toward the exit, something shifted within her, a spark, barely a whisper of defiance. For the first time in a long while, a thought crossed her mind. Maybe this isn't the end. The palace doors loomed ahead, massive and imposing. Outside, the bitter wind of the mining planet awaited her. The once proud princess was now nothing more than an outcast. As the gates closed behind her, she took one last look at the only life she had ever known, feeling the weight of her father's rejection settle deep in her chest. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This wasn't the end of her story. Ethan's hands were covered in grease as he examined the hull of the vessel. The ship was old, its rusted exterior telling the story of countless years spent in the scrapyard of this forgotten mining planet. It would take a lot of work, but Ethan was used to that. A mechanic by trade, he could fix anything, no matter how broken. The wind blew the dust around him, and the barren, desolate landscape stretched out in every direction. It wasn't the life he'd hoped for, but it was the life he had now. He had come to the planet for a job, nothing more. Fix the ship, get paid, and move on. That was the routine. He didn't expect to make connections, and he certainly didn't expect to care about the lives of the people here. The galaxy had never been kind to humans, and Ethan had learned long ago to keep his head down, do his work, and stay out of the way of the alien elites. But then he heard the whispers, the rumors about the fallen princess, Solara, the emperor's only daughter, exiled to this barren world after a humiliating public shaming. The stories were everywhere, carried on the wind from traders, miners, and the occasional passing ship. The once proud princess of a mighty empire now reduced to nothing more than a forgotten exile. Ethan hadn't cared much about royalty or politics. It was all too far removed from his life. But something about Solara's story struck a chord in him. She wasn't just a princess cast aside. She was a person who had been betrayed by her own blood, and now she was stranded on a planet where no one cared about her past. One day, while repairing the ship, He saw her. Solara sat alone in the shadows of a crumbling stone wall, her eyes distant, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The vibrant green of her skin seemed dulled, no longer reflecting the pride she once carried. Her violet eyes, once full of hope, now seemed empty, like the planet she was trapped on. Ethan hesitated. He didn't know what to say or how to help, but something urged him forward. He walked up to her slowly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough from years of solitude. Solara didn't respond at first. Her gaze was fixed on the ground, lost in thoughts that seemed too heavy for her small frame. But then, she slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker in her gaze, a small spark of recognition. "Can I help you with something?" Ethan asked again, softer this time. He didn't know what he was offering, but it felt like the right thing to say. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but no words came. She shook her head instead, a tired gesture that seemed to say everything without speaking a single word. Ethan nodded, not pushing her. He turned back to the ship, his hands instinctively reaching for his tools. But something had changed. The job was no longer just about fixing ships. It was about something deeper. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her find her way again. As the days dragged on, Solara's exile became a painful routine. She spent most of her time in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the mining workers who whispered about her fall from grace. She no longer dressed in royal robes. Instead, she wore the plain, rough fabrics of the miners, her once beautiful green skin now dulled by the dust and grime of the planet. Her days blurred together, filled with solitude and the weight of her father's betrayal. But something was stirring within her. It wasn't hope, not yet. But there was a quiet, persistent thought, gnawing at her mind. "I am still here." She hadn't been completely broken, not yet. One evening, as the sun set behind the jagged mountains, Solara wandered through the small camp of workers. She passed the metal shacks and dimly lit tents where the miners slept, their murmurs lost in the howling wind. In the distance, she saw Ethan again, bent over a strange pile of scrap metal, his hands working with a skill that had caught her attention before. Ethan didn't look up when she approached. He was absorbed in his task, focused on the pile of broken machinery and discarded tools. She stopped a few feet away, watching him. He was always busy, always fixing something, repairing a broken part or cleaning a malfunctioning device. The hum of his work had become a constant in her days. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was someone who created, someone who could make something new out of nothing. After a long silence, Ethan finally glanced up, his face softened with weariness but still kind. "Need something?" he asked, his voice casual but with a note of concern that had lingered since their first meeting. "I don't know," Solara replied quietly. I don't feel like myself anymore." Ethan nodded as if he understood. Then, to her surprise, he gestured to the pile of scrap in front of him. "I'm building something. A chair. Not just any chair, though." Solara raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "A chair? A throne," he corrected, his tone laced with a quiet humor. "Not a royal one, not by a long shot, but it'll be something." She didn't understand at first, but then she saw the pieces he was gathering, bits of broken metal, shards of old technology, scraps from abandoned ships. It wasn't just junk. Each piece seemed carefully chosen, carefully placed. As he worked, Ethan spoke, his hands never pausing. "I know what it feels like," he said, his voice low. "To be cast aside, to feel like you don't matter. But that doesn't mean you can't build something for yourself." Solara watched as the beginnings of the throne took shape. It was crude, imperfect, but there was a kind of beauty in it. Each dented piece of metal, each rusted bolt, was part of a whole, something new, a throne built from the brokenness of their lives. And for the first time since her exile, Solara felt a flicker of something long buried. "Maybe I can make something of myself again." As the days passed, the throne grew in size and complexity. What had started as a simple, makeshift chair now took on the shape of something more, something purposeful. Ethan worked tirelessly, his hands coated in grime as he welded together metal parts, every motion precise, every choice deliberate. And all the while, Solara watched from the shadows, her presence a quiet witness to the creation of something that felt both personal and significant. At first, she hadn't known what to make of Ethan's obsession with the throne. But now, as it grew stronger, more defined, she found herself drawn to it. It wasn't just a chair, it was a symbol. A throne, forged from scraps and discarded machinery, meant to restore her dignity. The longer she watched, the more she realized Ethan wasn't just building something physical, he was building her back up, piece by piece. One morning, a group of Solara's old confidants arrived, cautiously, like shadows in the early dawn. The first to approach was Marlan, a former advisor who had once been a trusted figure in the Emperor's court. His bioluminescent skin flickered nervously under the dim light, and his voice trembled when he spoke. "I never thought I'd see you again, Princess," he said, his tone respectful but tinged with regret. "We thought you were lost to us." Solara had always been a symbol of strength in the eyes of her people, but now, stripped of her title, she felt like a mere ghost of what she once was. Still, she held her head high and offered Marlan a quiet nod. "I'm still here," she said, the weight of her words carrying more than she intended. "But I need your help." The others gathered around, eyes wide with uncertainty but willing to listen. Solara could see the hesitation in their faces. They had all heard the stories of her fall from grace, the Emperor's scorn, her exile. To many, it seemed like a hopeless cause. But something had shifted in the air. The throne Ethan was building was more than just metal and machinery. It was a call to action, a quiet rallying point for those who had been abandoned by the Emperor. Marlan glanced over at Ethan, his brow furrowing with confusion. "And him?" he asked, motioning toward the mechanic, who had been working silently behind Solara. Ethan paused and wiped his hands on a rag, meeting Marlan's gaze. "I'm just a mechanic," he said, his voice steady but carrying a quiet conviction. "But I can build things that matter." There was a silence, an unspoken understanding that passed between them. Solara knew that they had come here for more than just the throne. They had come because, like her, they had lost everything, and like her, they were searching for something to rebuild. "What we're doing here," Solara said, her voice stronger than before, "is not just about a throne. It's about something bigger. It's about taking back what's ours." As the group nodded, the beginnings of an alliance took shape, one built not on bloodlines or politics, but on shared loss and the quiet promise of something more. Together, they would fight. The throne stood completed in the center of the camp, its form a testament to the work and determination that had gone into it. It wasn't perfect, its surface was rough, the metal edges jagged in places, but to Solara, it was beautiful. It was hers, forged from the very scrap the galaxy had thrown away. A symbol of her resilience and a powerful reminder of what she was capable of. She hadn't felt this alive in weeks, maybe months. The emptiness that had consumed her since her father's rejection still lingered, but it was different now. The throne had changed something in her. Sitting upon it for the first time, she felt the weight of her past, but also the strength to face the future. The memories of her father's cruel words still echoed in her mind, but they no longer held the power they once did. This was no longer just a symbol of her exile. It was a rallying point. Ethan stood beside her, watching her with quiet pride. The work he'd put into building the throne had been more than physical. It had been an act of faith. He'd believed in her when no one else had. The throne, however humble, was proof of that belief. Solara straightened her posture, her hands resting on the armrests. It was awkward at first, unfamiliar, but as she sat there, she felt the weight of something greater than herself pressing down. The throne was not just a seat, it was her claim to power, however small the first step might be. She wasn't just a discarded princess anymore, she was someone who could rebuild. Her first act on the throne was simple but profound. She addressed the group of loyalists who had gathered around, some still uncertain, some ready to follow her without question. "This throne," Solara began, her voice strong despite the remnants of uncertainty, "isn't just for me, it's for all of us." Her eyes swept across the faces in the crowd. "The Emperor cast us aside, but we are still here, and we will not be silenced. We will rebuild what was lost." Ethan watched, his expression unreadable, But there was something in the way he held himself, something that spoke of pride in the woman who now sat on the throne he had built. The crowd was silent for a moment, taking in her words. Then, one by one, they began to nod, murmurs of agreement rippling through the group. The once muted glances they shared turned into something stronger, a spark of hope, a quiet resolve. For the first time since Solara's exile, they felt that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Solara stood, lifting her head higher than she had in weeks. The throne wasn't just a chair. It was a declaration, a promise that she would no longer be an afterthought, that she would not be a symbol of failure. The galaxy had cast her aside, but she was not done. Not yet. Ethan stepped back, watching as Solara took her first steps toward reclaiming everything that had been taken from her. The throne, though simple, was the first piece of a much bigger puzzle. And now, the message was clear. They were ready to fight. The news of Solara's rise spread quickly, like wildfire through the scattered outposts and forgotten corners of the galaxy. What had once been a whispered rumor about the fallen princess sitting on a throne of scraps was now a rallying cry. The throne itself, crude and unpolished though it was, became a symbol of defiance against the Emperor's oppressive reign. And Solara, the exiled princess, was no longer just a victim of fate, she was a leader. Ethan watched as more and more of the planet's inhabitants came to see her, drawn by the whispers and rumors. They came in small groups at first, hesitant, unsure of what to expect from the woman who had once been royalty. But as they saw her, sitting proudly on her throne, her posture strong despite the weight of her exile, they began to believe. For the first time in a long while, there was something resembling hope in their eyes, hope that they weren't forgotten, hope that they weren't alone, and that perhaps together they could change things. Solara had always been a symbol of power in the Emperor's court, but now she was more than just a princess. She was the leader of something bigger, something that could challenge the very foundation of the empire. She had come to understand that it wasn't the throne that gave her power. It was the people who believed in her, the people who were willing to risk everything to follow her. Ethan had never set out to be part of a rebellion. He was a mechanic, just a man trying to make a living. But when he saw Solara's determination, when he saw how much she was willing to sacrifice for those who had been cast aside, he knew that he couldn't turn away. He had built the throne, yes, but it was her strength that had made it a beacon. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Solara gathered those who had come to stand by her. The crowd had grown larger, and their eyes were filled with a new kind of fire, one that matched her own. "This is just the beginning," Solara said, her voice steady and commanding. "We will not be silenced. We will not hide. The Emperor thinks he can break us, but we are stronger than he believes." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices rising in unison. There was a raw energy in the air, a feeling that they had finally found something worth fighting for. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her. For the first time since he had arrived on the planet, he felt like he was part of something that mattered. He wasn't just fixing ships and machinery anymore. He was helping to rebuild a people, a galaxy. As Solara spoke, her words filled the air with purpose. The rebellion was no longer a distant dream. It was a tangible reality. They had a chance now, a real chance, to take back what had been stolen from them. And Solara, with her throne and her quiet strength, was the spark that would ignite the fire. The peace Solara had briefly enjoyed shattered like glass when the first of the Emperor's forces arrived. A fleet of sleek ships, their hulls painted in the Emperor's colors, descended upon the mining planet. The ground trembled beneath their landing, a signal that their war machines had arrived. It wasn't a question of if the Emperor would strike back, but when and now. The answer was clear. Solara had known this moment would come. The Emperor, though distant and cruel, wasn't blind. He would never allow his daughter's defiance to go unpunished. His pride demanded that he squash any challenge to his rule. But Solara had made a promise not just to herself, but to the people who had begun to believe in her. And she would not back down. Not now. Ethan stood at her side, his hands steady as he prepared for the inevitable battle. The ship he had been working on for weeks, once intended for simple repairs, had now become their primary means of resistance. He and a group of miners had worked together, modifying the ship to make it a fighting vessel. It wasn't perfect, nothing was, but it was a start. Solara had made her decision. She would face the Emperor's forces head-on. She would not hide behind the walls of the mining camp, nor would she cower in the shadows. The throne she sat upon was no longer just a symbol of defiance. It was the foundation of an uprising, and she would lead it. As the Emperor's forces landed, Solara gathered her small army. The rebels, a ragtag collection of miners, exiles, and outcasts, stood ready to fight. They had no formal training, no high-tech weapons or armor. What they had was belief. Belief in their cause. Belief in the woman who had given them hope when they had none. "We're not here to lose," Solara said, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the group. "We're here to show the Emperor that we will fight for what's ours, for what's right, for our future." Ethan watched her, his heart swelling with pride. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was their leader, their queen, and in this moment, he realized that he would follow her anywhere. The first shots rang out as the Emperor's forces advanced. The rebels returned fire, but their weapons were crude, their aim often off. The battle was chaotic, the air thick with smoke and the sound of distant explosions. But despite the odds, the rebels held their ground. Ethan was everywhere, fixing what was broken, helping where he could. His mechanical mind worked quickly, adapting to the sudden demands of battle. But it wasn't his skills that mattered in this moment. It was his resolve. Just as Solara had her throne to sit upon, Ethan had his loyalty to her unshakable, unwavering. And as the battle raged on, the ground beneath them shaking with the weight of the Emperor's fury, something changed. The rebels fought with everything they had. And for the first time, Solara felt it, a shift in the air, a spark that ignited something bigger than any of them had realized. The Emperor's forces were powerful, but they hadn't counted on the power of belief. The battle had raged for hours, and the rebel forces, though outnumbered, had held their ground. Solara's leadership had kept them united, but the Emperor's forces were relentless, and it was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed the camp. The rebels had fought bravely, but they lacked the firepower and resources to win this fight outright. It was during a brief lull in the chaos, when the sounds of explosions and gunfire seemed to subside momentarily, that Solara found herself standing in front of a weathered building at the edge of the camp. Ethan had led her there, his face drawn with exhaustion but his expression determined. This wasn't a place of battle, but a place of history, a place where the future of their rebellion could be shaped. Inside the small structure, the walls were lined with shelves filled with old datapads, dusty tomes, and ancient relics. It was the last remaining archive of the fallen royal court records of treaties, laws, and the history of the empire. As Solara scanned the room, her eyes landed on a small datapad, its screen cracked but still functional. Ethan, ever the practical one, gently pried it from the shelf, the technology so outdated that it seemed almost like a relic from another time. "This," Ethan said, his voice low, "might give us the edge we need." Solara took the datapad from him, her hands trembling slightly. She knew the Emperor's reign had been built on secrets, lies hidden beneath layers of power, but this was different. This wasn't just about politics or betrayal. This was about something much more personal. As she tapped the screen, the datapad flickered to life, revealing a set of encrypted files. Ethan, his brow furrowed in concentration, quickly began working to crack the code. It took only moments, but in those few seconds, Solara's heart raced. What was she about to uncover? When the files finally opened, what they revealed shook Solara to her core. The documents contained records of the Emperor's most heinous actions, treaties he had manipulated, leaders he had betrayed, and entire populations he had oppressed for the sake of consolidating his power. But there was more. Hidden among the texts were references to a secret weapon, a weapon of unimaginable power that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. Solara's mind raced. The Emperor's cruelty was one thing, but the existence of such a weapon meant that the stakes of their rebellion were even higher than she had imagined. The Empire's iron grip on the galaxy wasn't just fueled by greed, it was sustained by fear. The weapon, hidden away and only whispered about in the Emperor's most trusted circles, could bring the rebellion to its knees. "Ethan," Solara said, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to stop him. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about the entire galaxy." Ethan met her gaze, his jaw tight. "We'll stop him. Together." They knew the path ahead would be treacherous, but now they had something the Emperor hadn't counted on, a weapon of their own. The truth. The sky above the mining planet was streaked with the colors of dusk, a pale red glow illuminating the distant hills. The battle had reached its peak, but Solara knew it was not a fight they could win here, not without more resources, more strategy. The Emperor's forces had overwhelmed the outer defenses, and their sheer numbers were beginning to push the rebels back. But there was one thing they had that the Emperor did not: the element of surprise. Solara stood at the edge of the camp, watching the rebels prepare for the final stages of their escape. Ethan stood beside her, his face shadowed with exhaustion but resolute. They knew that retreat was the only option now, but it was not a defeat. It was a strategic withdrawal, a chance to regroup, to learn from this battle, and to strike again when they were ready. They had more to fight for than just survival. They had the truth, and that was a power the Emperor could never take from them. Ethan turned to Solara, his expression serious. "We've got one shot at this. We need to move quickly, or we'll be trapped." Solara nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. She had led her people into battle, and now she was leading them out. The thought of abandoning the camp, abandoning the people who had stood by her, filled her with guilt. But she knew it was the only choice. The rebellion could not afford to lose its leader, not yet. "Get the ship ready," Solara said, her voice calm despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I'll gather the last of the wounded and get them to safety." Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned on his heel and sprinted toward the makeshift ship they had prepared for this moment. It wasn't much a patched-up vessel that had once been a freighter, now repurposed as their escape ship. It wasn't a warship, but it was fast, and it could carry them out of here, out of the Emperor's reach. They needed to reach the rebel fleet, to find the reinforcements they had been waiting for. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. The rebels packed their belongings, gathering weapons, supplies, and the wounded. Solara moved through them, her presence a steadying force. She offered encouragement, words of hope, and the reminder that this was not the end. They would regroup, they would strike back. They had come too far to fail now. As the ship's engines roared to life, Solara and Ethan climbed aboard, taking their places at the controls. The ship lifted off the ground, its engines screaming against the weight of their escape. Behind them, the camp burned, the flames lighting up the darkening sky. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the engines, the silence of their departure. But in that silence, something shifted. The rebellion was not over. It had only just begun. They had lost this battle, but the war was far from finished. "We'll return," Solara whispered, staring at the planet growing smaller beneath them. "We'll make sure the Emperor pays for what he's done." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We'll be ready." The rebel fleet drifted in formation, its vessels patched together from scrap and salvaged parts, floating like a cluster of fragile stars against the black void of space. Ascendant Peak loomed ahead, an asteroid field full of ancient debris, perfect for ambush. This was their chance to strike back at the Emperor's forces. If they won here, the galaxy would know the rebellion was real. If they lost, it was over. Solara's hands gripped the command chair tightly, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the battlefield. The Emperor's fleet was formidable, massive dreadnoughts and sleek fighter ships lined up in perfect formation. But Solara had something they didn't: resolve. Her rebellion was made up of miners, exiles, and refugees, people who had nothing left to lose. "Incoming," Ethan's voice cut through the tension in the room. He stood at the weapons station, his fingers poised over the controls. The radar showed multiple enemy ships approaching, their forms growing larger by the second. "They're locking on." Solara's jaw clenched. "Return fire. Don't give them an inch." The rebel fleet scattered as the first shots fired, laser beams lighting up the darkness. Solara's ship shook violently as a hit from the enemy's laser cannons struck the shields. She gritted her teeth, steering the ship expertly between the incoming blasts. "Shields are holding, but they're weakening," Ethan reported. "We need to make this count." Solara nodded, her mind racing. Ethan, target their lead ship. Focus everything on them. Ethan's fingers flew over the console, locking onto the lead ship of the Emperor's fleet. The rebel ship's cannons hummed to life, firing concentrated blasts at the enemy. The first shot hit its target, sending the lead ship veering off course. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was a start. The Emperor's fleet wasn't going to give up easily. "Keep up the pressure," Solara shouted over the chaos. "We can't let them regroup." Her crew worked with frantic precision, the hum of engines and the clashing of weapons filling the cabin. Ethan remained at his station, his eyes never leaving the screen, targeting ship after ship, each blast a message to the Empire. Their victory didn't lie in the strength of their weapons, but in their unity. Each blast from their ship was a declaration. They would not be silenced. Another ship exploded in the distance, but it wasn't a rebel vessel. It was one of the Emperor's dreadnoughts. The sight gave the crew a new sense of purpose, their resolve steeled by the thought that they were winning, that the Empire wasn't invincible. "We're doing it," Ethan muttered, watching the carnage unfold. "We're holding them off." Solara took a deep breath, her hands steady on the controls. "No, we're winning." The battle raged on for hours, but the tide had begun to turn. The Emperor's fleet, once so powerful and overwhelming, was beginning to falter. Their ships were in disarray. The rebels were outnumbered, but they fought with desperation and heart. It was enough. Solara's heart pounded in her chest as the final blows landed. The Emperor's fleet retreated, leaving the rebels victorious for the first time. The rebel fleet drifted in the silence of space, still reeling from their victory. Ascendant Peak had been a brutal battle, but they had won. The Emperor's fleet had retreated, and for the first time in a long while, the rebels felt a fleeting sense of hope. But Solara knew better than to let that hope cloud her judgment. The Emperor wasn't finished with them. This victory would only provoke him further. She stood in the command center of the ship, staring out at the stars. The lights from distant planets shimmered like fragile promises in the dark. Ethan approached her, his expression as focused as ever. He had been instrumental during the battle, his sharp mind guiding them through the chaos. "Solara," he said, his voice quiet, "I found something while we were in the midst of the battle." She turned toward him, concern rising in her chest. "What is it?" Ethan held up a data pad, his brow furrowed. "It's a message from the Emperor's fleet. It was encrypted, but I was able to crack it. It's from one of his commanders. The Emperor is planning something big. He's gathering his forces for another strike, and this time, it's going to be decisive." Solara's heart sank as she processed the information. The Emperor wasn't just licking his wounds, he was preparing for a counterattack. This wouldn't be a small skirmish. He was coming for them with everything he had. "We can't let him get the upper hand," Solara said, her voice firm. "If he's assembling his forces, we need to act fast." Ethan nodded, his fingers moving over the controls of the datapad. "He's sending his most loyal generals. They're targeting the next rebel stronghold, and if we don't make a move soon, it'll be over." Solara clenched her fists, her mind already working on their next move. "We don't wait for him to come to us. We hit him first." Ethan met her gaze. "You're suggesting we go on the offensive?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the decision. "We've proven we can stand up to him once. We have to do it again. But this time, we take the fight to his doorstep. We need to strike before he has time to organize." She turned to address the crew, the room quieting at her command. "We've only just begun to challenge the Emperor. But now, we make it personal. We won't wait for him to crush us. We're going after him." The room buzzed with energy, the crew members exchanging determined glances. They had all been tested, but this was different. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to win. "We're in this together," Solara said, her voice resolute, "and we'll take the fight to the Emperor, no matter what it costs." The rebel fleet had never been more ready. The scars of the previous battle still lingered, but they had a new sense of purpose. The Emperor's forces had underestimated them once, but now they were making a bold move. Solara's plan was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and cripple the Emperor's hold on his empire. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about taking back control. They had found the Emperor's new stronghold, a hidden base in the outer rim, far from the eyes of the Galactic Council. It was where he had been consolidating his power, amassing an army to crush any rebellion. But Solara wasn't going to let that happen, not on her watch. Solara stood in the war room, staring at the map of the system. Ethan was beside her, his gaze just as focused as hers. They had been through so much together, but this mission was the most important. It would determine the fate of the rebellion. "Here," Solara said, pointing to a small moon that orbited the base. "We'll land there, and then we infiltrate. We strike fast, hit their command center, and disable their ability to launch reinforcements." Ethan nodded. "We can't afford to waste time. We need to move quickly and decisively." "Exactly," Solara replied. "We do this right, and we'll cripple the Empire, but we need to be ready for whatever they throw at us." The crew moved quickly, preparing their ships for the assault. There was no fear, only resolve. This was their chance, their best chance. They weren't just fighting for Solara's throne anymore. They were fighting for a galaxy that had been subjugated for too long. As the fleet moved into position, the tension was palpable. Every ship, no matter how small, had a role to play. The Empire was massive, but the rebellion had something the Emperor couldn't match: unity and the will to fight for freedom. The journey to the moon was swift, but when they arrived, the Emperor's forces were already waiting. Their fleet of warships hovered like a wall of iron, blocking any route to their target. The time for subtlety was over. This would be a battle fought with everything they had. "We're going in," Solara said, her voice calm but firm. "There's no turning back now." The rebel fleet surged forward, engaging the enemy with a fury they had never known. The Emperor's forces fired back, but the rebels were faster, more agile. Their ships danced through the battlefield like shadows, striking with precision. In the midst of the chaos, Solara's command ship broke through the enemy lines, heading straight for the heart of the base. Ethan sat at the weapons station, guiding their ship with deadly accuracy. They couldn't afford any mistakes. As they neared the command center, Solara's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment of truth. She had come too far to fail now. This wasn't just about taking down an emperor, it was about freeing the galaxy from his grip. The command center of the Emperor's base was a stark, imposing structure, its cold metal walls echoing with the sound of distant explosions. The rebel fleet had driven the Emperor's forces back, but this was the final confrontation. Solara's heart raced as the ship plunged deeper into the complex, past the wreckage of the Emperor's fleet. There was no turning back now. "Approaching the target," Ethan said, his voice calm and focused despite the chaos that surrounded them. "We're ready." Solara nodded, her grip firm on the chair's armrest. The Emperor had hidden himself away, believing he was safe in the heart of his empire. He was wrong. The time for hiding was over. This was their moment to end his reign. As the ship broke through the final defenses, Solara's crew began to move with purpose. The hatch opened, and they filed out, weapons drawn, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The corridors of the Emperor's fortress were cold and unwelcoming, the walls adorned with symbols of his cruel reign. Solara's eyes narrowed with determination. She had come too far to fail now. The rebels moved swiftly, navigating the fortress's maze-like halls. There was no fear in their steps, only the certainty of their cause. Every victory, every life lost in the name of the rebellion, had led to this moment. They would not let it slip away. At last, they reached the heart of the base, the Emperor's throne room. The door was massive, an overbearing structure that symbolized everything wrong with his empire. As it slid open, Solara stepped forward, leading her crew into the room. The Emperor sat upon his throne, a smug expression on his face as he looked down at them. His posture was regal, his hands resting lazily on the armrests. He exuded arrogance, as if he knew the galaxy was his. But today, that belief would be shattered. "Solara," the Emperor said, his voice laced with disdain. "You're too late. The galaxy belongs to me. You cannot defeat what is already mine." Solara's voice was steady as she spoke, cutting through his words. "Not anymore. Your time is over." A flicker of surprise crossed the Emperor's face, but it was quickly masked by his arrogance. "You think you've won. You've only delayed the inevitable." But Solara didn't hesitate. She had come to end this. As the Emperor rose from his throne, a final clash erupted, fast and brutal. The fight was swift, not just of strength but of spirit. The Emperor's forces, though powerful, couldn't match the rebellion's resolve. In the end, the Emperor fell. His reign was over, not by force of arms alone, but by the unity and determination of those who had stood against him. His empire crumbled, leaving a galaxy ripe for renewal. Solara stood at the center of the throne room, breathing heavily. The air was still, but a new feeling filled the space. Hope, freedom. The future was uncertain, but the galaxy was no longer under the Emperor's thumb. As she looked out at the stars, Solara knew their fight wasn't over, but they had won. And from this moment forward, the galaxy would be theirs to rebuild.